Talk about why I call you my hood mentors. I find myself at this conference and I'm standing there talking to somebody and I'm telling them, hey, I'm from Atlanta and I got this property in the city and it's on such and such street, and it was in the hood. And you two were standing behind me, and Frank overheard me say the name of the street. And you said, in Atlanta? I know that street. One thing led to another. We came back to Atlanta. You put me on game. You showed me how to turn that property that I was afraid to invest in into a cash flowing opportunity that still pays me and my family now some 7 years later. Hello and welcome to the Property Power Play. My name is Kito J Johnson and I am your host. And it is right here that we empower you with the tools necessary to play the game of real estate and win. I'm delighted to have today's conversation and to welcome my special guest to the show, Frank Morales and Ms. Lynn Meroll. Thank you so much for being here. First, I want you to tell everyone who you are. We'll start with you, Lynn, from your perspective.
We came to Atlanta a few years ago, 10 years ago to be precise, and we basically buy and hold properties here.
We're green affordable housing providers, meaning that our operation has solely been buying dilapidated properties and bringing them back to life. As a student at Georgia Tech now, I'm able to know that that's green because it uses less energy and materials than starting fresh. So that's a new mantra that I put onto the title.
Let's talk about subsidized housing, or Section 8 as it's been referred to in the past. Subsidized housing comes with a stigma. There are those, especially suburban investors, who say, I want my house torn up. How has subsidized housing been for you? Can you talk to that experience, maybe the pros and the cons, and why you are still here?
First of all, these are God's kids. So these are our brothers and sisters that they deserve a chance like anybody else. And for those that don't want to do affordable housing, God bless you.
Right, more to go around.
That's right, God bless you.
Mostly it's been a very positive experience, and there's challenges in managing the tenants that we have. There's challenges with the bureaucracy that we face, and in the housing authority there's two parts. One is client services or landlord services, and one is tenant services, and they don't always seem to be working in sync, and so we get caught in the middle of all of that. So there's a few challenges, of course, like that, and our houses have been torn apart a lot of times, and we just go in there and fix it. It doesn't even faze us.
So I want to backtrack. I want to have just a moment of story time to talk about why I call you my hood mentors. This has been, 7, 8 years ago. I was mentoring someone around wholesaling. Right, and he brought our first deal to the table, his first deal to the table, and it was in the hood. Now, prior to this point, all of my experience has been in the suburbs, where it's safe, where it's comfortable, right? But I could not tell my mentee, we're not gonna do this deal because it was such a great deal. So we bought the property and boarded it up, and it stayed boarded up for a year. And I find myself at this conference in Miami, Florida, this real estate conference, and I had not known you two. And I'm standing there talking to somebody and I'm telling them, hey, I'm from Atlanta and I got this property in the city and it's on such and such street and I don't know what I'm gonna do with it because it's in the hood, I don't wanna go to the hood. And you two were standing behind me, and Frank overheard me say the name of the street. And you said, in Atlanta? I know that street. One thing led to another. We came back to Atlanta and you put me on game. You showed me how to turn that property that I was afraid to invest in into a cash flowing opportunity that still pays me and my family now some 7 years later. And so everything I do now is in the inner city. I don't have anything in the suburbs anymore, with the exception of one Airbnb. So thank you so much for putting me on. And for being who you are. There's revitalization going on all around the country in major cities. And one of the things that often comes up is gentrification. Gentrification often gets a bad rep because most times when we hear and talk about gentrification, the reference is about individuals who don't look like the community coming into the community and pushing residents out of the community. One of the reasons I love the subsidized housing play is because it allows me to go into a neighborhood and take advantage of what's happening with the values and the increase of values. So I can acquire a property at a great price. I can put some resources into the property and then capitalize on the new value, but choose to hold on to the property. And that's when I play in the subsidized game. I then allow individuals through subsidies to rent those properties from me. So everybody wins. I'm an investor that gets to invest. I get to have the ownership of the property. I get the benefits of the property for long-term appreciation. And then those who have lived in the community for years still have an opportunity to stay in the community and live in the space that they've always known. I want to talk about your strategy. Where does the subsidized housing piece come in? What's your passion around that, and how do you leverage that in your chosen strategy?
Well, first of all, it's helping people and helping them not only establish residence, but Frank and I were kind of both passionate about the fact that we want our people to move in the right direction, whether it is mentoring them towards buying a new home or making sure that the children and everybody in that home has at least internet, so that they have access to everything. And second is actually the finances too. It's a stable paycheck.
Financial freedom is the chief goal. And this would just happen to be our vehicle. When we came here, our intent was to rent out rooms. That was our business in Seattle, even today.
Right.
So
to buy a property, multiple bedrooms,
right,
and create a quote-unquote rooming house.
Correct, exactly. So, but back in those days, in 2013, our Atlanta Housing Authority wouldn't even come in these neighborhoods. So these neighborhoods were off limits. And I know a guy who was a realtor, and he was given a list of zip codes, the zip codes of death.
Yeah.
So, and this happened to be in, these happen to be generally in those, what they call back then, zip codes of death.
Yeah, so you buy these inexpensive houses, you gentrify them or make them rent ready, right? Is that what I'm hearing? Eventually.
No, we bought the houses. We still have one house in 2013 that's not rehabbed yet. So we just bought them. If we had $5 and we could buy a house for $5, we could either buy another house or we could rehab the house that we had. So we chose to keep buying. And so they were all boarded up until eventually we were able to start rehabbing.
Got you. That's interesting. So you buy multiple houses, right? You buy them because they're cheap, and they're not going to stay cheap. And you have the wisdom to know that, right? Because you're a refugee, right? You just came from an area where you saw this process play out.
Yes.
Right.
Central District in Seattle.
Yes.
Look it up.
So you have that foresight, and okay, I'm just gonna buy up these houses, and eventually I'll get to renovating them, and eventually. So let's fast forward. Now you're at the point of renovating, right? You renovate them, and what's that process look like? You're renovating them, and then what?
So our very first thing was that we were going to rent out rooms, right? And we did that, and we had a manager who was managing them, but all of that fell apart. It was just very difficult to manage in that area code. And so beginning was that. And then we had to kind of move towards finding another source that would be more stable for us. And then it was Atlanta Housing that came into the picture. Okay. And it was very difficult because like he said, at that time they were not renting in that area. They were not considering. So we had to do a lot of talking to people, networking, and we have a wonderful gentleman who is very familiar, who is a contractor, very familiar with the area, and use his expertise, and you're very familiar with the guy, and use his expertise to say, okay, do this, 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 and the other, which is like, even if the other houses are boarded or abandoned, here's how you fix that and make the neighborhood look presentable and all that stuff. So.
In subsidized housing, we're making a difference in people's lives. We're providing opportunities that someone might not ordinarily have if we weren't willing to take a risk on the system and take a risk on them as a tenant. Frank said earlier, they're God's children. They're people just like us. What advice would you give to a young person who says, I feel that as a calling too?
I would say that is absolutely fantastic. Congratulations for even thinking that way. And the second is there's, like I think I heard you say earlier about your network, and the network that you build, if you have any questions, people have answers. And there's a lot of people out there who will help you in everything that you want to do.
I would say for young people, you're not going to have all the answers. You're never going to get to the point where you know everything. So it's always going to be scary. It's always going to be a challenge. But the simplest thing I would recommend somebody to do is just make offers. Make a ridiculous offer that if they take it, you can't say no. But a ridiculous offer, and get used to it. You just have to find a good agent that'll write that ridiculous offer without them thinking you're wasting their time.
Yeah.
And take a step in that direction. And I think in time,
Yeah.
with God's grace, it'll work out.
I want to end with this. People get started and they start prospering and they're doing all of these things, but they don't really know what success means or will look like for them. I tell people real estate is my drug of choice. I'm ready to buy the next house, and I'm ready to chill out. And then another great deal comes, I'm ready to buy it, I'm ready to buy it. I'm always running after something. But Lynn, you have an interesting perspective. And I think this is a great place to can you just tell us your perspective? Like what does success look like?
First of all, you have to be content. And that's a mindset in itself. Right? So there's always the next big deal and there's always the next big thing. Where and when are you going to stop and smell the roses and travel or do whatever it is that you want to do? Yeah. Right? So for me, it is a number that I had, and we had discussed it, and it was like, you know what? This is enough. Like, what are we going to do? We're just good stewards. We have to be good stewards of what we have and all the resources that we have. Yeah. And we're not going to take anything on the other side. Yeah. It is so personal, retirement or that level of contentment or whatever. It is so personal to each individual, right? That you have to come up with your number and you have to come up with your business strategy saying, this is where I'm going to stop and pause and I'm going to go freaking enjoy life. That's
so important. Like, what is your number and when is enough enough? And I think that's such a valuable lesson for us to close the show with. Like, whatever industry you're in, like whatever you are doing to create cash flow. And I noticed you said semi-retired, and I imagine the only reason you said semi is because Frank's still buying houses. Like, Frank's still buying. Liz, like, I want to travel, I want to go away for another month, but Frank's still buying houses. So I think for all entrepreneurs, we really need to sit down and ask ourselves that question, and then create a game plan, a strategy to get there. And then when you get there, take a breath, right, and just enjoy it. Thank you both for being here. I say it all the time, and I know you know my heart when I say it. My life, the trajectory of my life, changed the day I met you.
Yep, by God's grace, see?
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kito. You know, you're very, very, very special to us. You know that. There's something about you and something about us together. So it's so great to be a part of your life.
Yes. Thank you. We enjoy.
Well, this has been the Property Power Play. I'm Kito J Johnson, your host, and I want to thank you so much for being a part. It's right here that we equip you with the tools necessary to play the game of real estate and win. See you next time.
The Convo, the two-time 2023 Telly Award-winning network and your home for conversations around Black wealth, available on all platforms.